Good morning for the second session here for the second plenary session about representation. If people could take a seat, it would be wonderful. We are a little bit behind, but I think this is a very important session. So we hope to make sure that everybody gets at least 8 to 10 minutes of speaking time, and we really want to have the opportunity for you to ask questions at the end of this session. So we might run into your lunchtime, and we might keep your lunch at maybe 45 minutes rather than an hour. So if you don't have a chance to network during lunch, then the gala dinner, there's tickets always welcome. You can come on and network at the gala dinner. So I appreciate it. It's getting pretty full, but we've still got some space for the gala dinner. So first of all, I'd like to recognise the traditional owners of the land, past and present, and acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. Today we have presenters, but there's no ethnic community broadcaster up here. But there's all the ethnic community broadcasters down here. So that's what I want to leave question times for. And who is represented in the media is becoming even more important, especially since the results of the US election, with Trump now in power, and with the Brexit vote, and the changes that are happening in the world, representation in the media, and how media reports on issues is becoming even more important. Australia is facing a similar situation with the rise in dissatisfaction with the political system, stronger sentiment against immigration, and a rise of far-right groups. And we see some of them in our parliament. How the media report on these issues is extremely important. It's no doubt that ethnic community broadcasting is a major contributor to social cohesion and multiculturalism. Certainly you all know that, and you do that every day on your program. However, for all the good work that you do, it just takes one radio shock job from our mainstream media to make a single statement on their radio program, and social cohesion can be shattered, division deepened, who doesn't gain that recognition that it does in the wider community. So this session, I'd like to pose the question: what can ethnic community broadcasters do to take it further, to have more of an influence in the wider community, to help build social cohesion and combat racism? Ethnic community broadcasters communicate in their own language to their own community, but they do more every day in their own communities worldwide. And as a third pillar of media in Australia, can community media be more influential? So that's what this session is about a little bit. So I'm posing that question to you. NEMBC did address this issue by a conference earlier this year in Melbourne, and we partnered with African Media Australia, which brings me to my first speaker, Clyde, who's the CEO of African Media Australia. So Clyde is the co-founder of African Media Australia. He was born in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, where he was educated and later worked as a journalist including the BBC. Clyde arrived in Australia in 1999, and while he settled into life in Australia, he also became president of the Democratic Republic of the Congo Community Association in Australia. He's also served as a board member of the African think tank and chairperson of African Professionals of Australia and the foundation director of African Media Australia. So welcome, Clyde. Thank you.
Thank you, Russell, for that wonderful presentation. Thank you to everyone for being here. As has been said, my name is Clyde, and I was born in the DRC. I arrived in Australia in 1999. I didn't work in the media when I arrived in Australia. I just didn't find any job to be able to support myself and be able to bring my family. But after a few years, I was a bit more settled, and I wanted to go back to my passion, passion in the media, and ask myself the question: what can I do? One thing that I experienced quite early since I arrived in Australia, for about 2-3 months, soon after arriving in Australia, I didn't have any job, so I was pretty much sitting at home all the time watching TV. And one thing that I saw, every time Africa came up on TV, it was nothing like the Africa I know. It was either children with flies in their mouths and people dying of hunger and all sort of very disturbing issues. Of course, those things were happening in Africa, but they were not the only things that were happening in Africa. And I actually got very angry inside of me. I said, why is this? Do these people know about Africa? Why is all they show about this sort of disturbing things? And the only other thing would be very happy with was the animals. All these other things about Africa, beautiful things that were never shown in the media. So I started writing a book. I remember that was early 1999. And I think I wrote even about 50 pages of that, but it's unfortunate that actually a few months later I lost, because we still have that 4-piece sort of disc then, and a friend of mine threw it in the bin. And I only found out later, oh my God, I lost like 150 hours of work that was thrown in the bin. But that just was something that I wanted to say. So talking about media misrepresentation. People like me from a migrant background, especially the new and emerging communities, because when you talk about migrants, we need to actually be more clear. There are people who have migrant background who pretty much are mainstream. French, Italian, Greeks, and they're now pretty much mainstream. They still have their migrant attributes. But the new and emerging communities are having a lot of issues when it comes to media representation. We are not properly represented in the media. This has been said here many times, but the question is, why is this the case, and what can be done about it? Obviously, the community broadcasting community here does a lot of great work to talk about things that are important to the community, the language, and all that sort of thing. But I would like to see more happening. All of us, I suppose, want to see more happening in mainstream media, because as much as we enjoy our language, the shows in our language in the radio, we want to see ourselves as part of this society through the media, mainstream media, which represents the society more broadly. And Africans are bearing the brunt of media misrepresentations. In Melbourne, where I'm from, we pretty much at war with a section of the media. And when you see the headlines about the youth violence and the apex and all the misrepresentation, it is just terrible. And it has significant implications in the lives of the communities. As it was said here, I'm not just working in the media sector as a community media person. I'm a community leader, and in my involvement with the community, I've seen so many issues and things happening, and a lot of it is also linked to how people see themselves misrepresented in the media. So this war, undeclared war against a section of our communities, and particularly I'll be speaking from my experience as an African person, is one that we are pretty much forced to fight. And like in every war, and I'm sorry I may be talking in a very combative language, but that's the reality in my community. People just feel like they are being bombarded by negative reporting all the time, which affects people's sense of identity, it's been said here, and also their sense of belonging, and that also affects how they see themselves in the society and how they are able to take advantage of the opportunities that are available in the society. Because all these discourses do affect how even employers look at Africans when they have African applicants for the positions that they have available. And unemployment is becoming a big issue in our communities, which I'm very sure are partly caused by all the incorrect and distorted perceptions of Africans in the community, and that applies also for many other communities. Now, like in every war, there's always a history and interest. And the history of this negative misrepresentation comes from the white Australia policy, which is long gone, but the effects continue. There's a section of the media that is fundamentally racist, anti-migration, and fundamentally racist. This has to be said. Australia is a beautiful country, and most Australians are very nice people, but there's a section of the media that remains overly racist, and this has to be addressed. And which leads me to the point that David Putnam, British filmmakers, made a little while ago on one of the tech talks. He says, does the media have a duty of care? Industries, or the organization, different industries have a duty of care. Why don't we expect the media to have a duty of care? Their output has the potential to cause significant detriment to the lives of individual and community. That's an interesting organization. Question, which led me with Russell and the NEMBC to organize a media migration and integration conference that took place. The inaugural conference took place in Melbourne on the 31st of May and 1st of June. I thought beyond my work in terms of trying to present more positive stories about Africans as a way to counter the negative representations in mainstream media, there was a need to do more because, and that's the case with most of our ethnic media, the majority of the audience come from our own communities, but the broader community out there only gets to see us as ethnic groups through the mainstream media. So we need to put a lot of attention in how things get changed in the mainstream media, in addition to strengthening our own ethnic media as a way to even develop skills to enable people to eventually go into mainstream media and represent the communities through their work there. So the conference went very, very, very good. Because of time, I'm going to talk about some of the recommendations of that conference. It was important, obviously, to have those discussions and start these discussions and continue them to look at how we can eventually get the mainstream media to become more diverse. You know, Australia rates very well as a multicultural country, and I would argue that we're better than most countries in the world. But when it comes to the media, it's a whole different story. We have remained defiantly, the media has remained defiantly monoculturalist, and something must be done to change it. There are some progress. It's not all negative. The Wali sort of phenomena is good, but it's only one person. There needs to be more that needs to be done, and we know NEMBC management is quite committed to bringing more diversity. SPS, and I'll argue there's definitely room for a lot more, but we'll talk about that in some of the recommendations of the conference, which we'll have to continue to work with many of you to try and push that forward. Excuse me. The recommendations looked at actions that needs to be taken by who. There are obviously different perspectives from different players in this whole thing. Mainstream media has a role to play. The community media, us, have a role to play. The community has community organizations and community groups have a role to play. Government bodies and regulators have a role to play, and educational institutions, like universities and that, have a role to play. So I'm just going to quickly read through some of those recommendations so that you have a bit of an idea, given the limited time. I don't want to take too much time. In terms of the commercial mainstream media, especially the commercial one, it was some of the recommendations included recruiting more journalists from a multicultural background, have a multicultural diversity officer appointed within this media outlets to work with upper management to clarify strategies and meet diversity goals within the organization, train current journalists on diversity and cultural competency and ways to better engage with new and emerging communities, organize visits of migrant community groups to media organizations so that they get to meet the journalists, the sub-editors, and have some sort of conversation there so people get to know each other. As you would know, proximity is power. When people get to know each other, they often end up developing relationships and living better harmony. Encouraging journalists to proactively meet multicultural groups, and that's also still part of the proximity thing. And the biggest issue I have to say with mainstream media, it's not so much on the journalists, it's more on the management. It's the management culture that often leads to all this misrepresentation. I'm yet to meet a very, obviously racist journalist. I know that there are many of them, including the Shock Radio and all that sort of thing, but most of the mainstream media journalists I've met in Melbourne, in Sydney, or wherever else I go, are very regular, good guys, but obviously, what they show is even what they think. But just to make the point is that it's more the management culture that needs to be addressed when it comes down to mainstream media. When it comes to community media, we need to work more to try to develop skills by young people. I missed the young youth conference yesterday, but these have to develop skills so that eventually they use this as a springboard to eventually go to mainstream media and do some work there. From the community, as a whole, we need to be more proactive in engaging with journalists and sub-editors and editors, and focus on community leaders to develop a relationship with the media. One thing we're doing as well is to have a community media sort of person where, because sometimes the journalists want to do some good work, but they don't know who to contact. If you have people who are ready to communicate with journalists when there's a story coming up and all that sort of thing, that works better. So there's a whole range of things here, but due to time, I won't be able to go into all of that. The government must do more. And this is where all of us, our political connections, we should do more to lobby the government, because the problem is no one wants to attack the media. The politicians don't want to attack the media because there are a lot of implications of that. So the media is sort of having a free ride on whatever they want to do. And we should be able to do more. It's good that the Greens actually are trying to do something, and we've heard what's been said there. Labour and some Liberal members are also trying to change this, but it's not happening. So I will stop there and just say that we all need to continue to take action to ensure the representation of our migrant community is improved, because that's what will continue to sustain this society as a diverse, multicultural, and harmonious society. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Clyde. I won't be saying too much in between. I want to keep it rolling, but Clyde didn't say that he's actually a video maker, and African Media Australia has a website. They produce videos quite regularly in their community, so he's a video maker and producer as well. So we'll move on to the next speaker, and unfortunately I'm down there. I should be up here with timekeeping, so just to keep on track. So if you see me moving forward on my chair, it's 10 minutes, so it's okay. So just so you get a chance to have a bit of discussion as well. So our next speaker is Dr. John Budarick, who's from the Department of Media and University of Adelaide. John researches in the area of ethnic media, diaspora and transnationalism. He's recently been conducting research into the practices of ethnic media producers in Australia, with a focus on their role in creating and sustaining relationships between different communities. So welcome, John. And the slide we do.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. So the role of media in Australia and elsewhere around the world in the representation of migrants, refugees, and ethnic minorities is pretty well established at this stage. I'm sure most people in this room are aware of that incredibly powerful role. Unfortunately, if one looks at the history of migrant representation in Australian news media, it's often a case of history repeating. Successive groups of migrants from geographical, cultural, and political areas as diverse as Eastern Europe, the Middle East, South and North Africa, and across Asia have been subjected to racist and discriminatory language in Australia's print and broadcast media. What is quite alarming and disturbing about this is the way that the quite overt racism of the late 19th and early 20th century press language droves and floods of migrants or aliens life is eerily similar to some of today's language in both the media and political discourses and discussions. The reasons behind this coverage, as Clyde alluded to, and its stubborn inconsistency are no doubt varied. Some of it is no doubt a result of civil racism. Some of it, though, is a lot more subtle and therefore a lot harder to actually shift. It no doubt is related to complex combination of social and political attitudes and ideologies, particular newsmaking practices, routines and resources, or a lack thereof, and global political changes seen today, as Russell alluded to, in the forms of Brexit and the rise of the new right in the United States, Europe, and even in Australia. The outcomes of such media representations are just as diverse. Academic, community and government research has highlighted the links between media portrayals and migrants' feelings of exclusion, their experiences of discrimination in the fields of employment, housing and education, and their inability to connect with wider Australian society and services. Media representation is clearly an issue at the heart of political debates around migration and multiculturalism in Australia in general. And when such debates are sometimes framed in terms of notions of not fitting in or not assimilating, the mainstream media's role in pushing migrants and minorities away and actively excluding them is certainly worth interrogating. What I want to talk about today, though, is the position of ethnic media in this context, and in particular their potential role as agents of dialogue and understanding, and as underutilised agents in the successful settlement of migrants in Australia. This is a role that can usefully be understood through the notion of social capital, which is basically a fancy way of talking about the power of relationships between people and between organisations. Ethnic media around the world have played a far more expansive and complex role than they are often given credit for. Their more recognised role is supporting migrant communities and helping to maintain languages, cultural practices and traditions is also joined by their position in debates over self-determination, national identity, religion and the politics of migrant settlement. The history of ethnic, migrant and foreign language media is littered with examples of political and social action. As early as the early 19th century, for example, the foreign language press in the United States was discussing political issues such as slavery, informing their readers on how to engage with white Americans, and trying to improve relations between migrants and the wider population. According to at least one study in Australia, the early ethnic and foreign language print media in Australia performed at least two main roles. The first was to act as a stepping stone between homeland and Australian cultures, successfully balancing homeland and hostland focus and assisting in the settlement process. So, as the authors of that study state, in discussing foreign language press, the press caters for the desire for news of the homeland and advises the retention of some of the old loyalties, believing that an abrupt break with the past leads to feelings of insecurity, loss, and bewilderment. At the same time, by instructing its readers in different ways, by encouraging to overcome difficulties and to cooperate actively with any countrymen, it leads them towards an understanding and acceptance of their future in Australia. What this touches on, I think, is something that's been touched on today already, and that is the power of actually maintaining certain traditions, certain languages, certain ethnic communities, and the way in which those communities, those organisations can actually assist in empowering migrants and aid in the settlement process. The second main role of the foreign language press in Australia was to act as a form of social glue amongst and between different ethnic communities, with ethnic papers facilitating exchange and interactions among different migrant groups. The papers also provided an educational service on the practicalities of life in Australia. So ethnic media throughout its history has been an incredibly important resource in terms of facilitating vibrant multicultural country that Australia is. Ethnic media continue to play such diverse roles today. Ethnic community broadcasting has been found to increase a sense of belonging and political participation amongst migrants and media producers. Ethnic media provides a sense of connection and understanding between different groups in society and helps migrants successfully negotiate new surroundings. Ethnic media, I have many slides, so using sparing. Ethnic media around the world have also been found to focus on local issues, involving themselves and their audiences in political, social, and cultural challenges facing their new society. This includes the process of reaching out to wider social structures and organisations, such as mainstream media, government, police, and other service providers. So how do we understand these roles in the role of ethnic media in language that might relate more directly to political and social policy? One way is through potentially the language of social capital. In focusing on the power and relevance of social relationships, social capital comes in three forms: bonding, linking, and bridging. And I think we can see a role for ethnic media across all of those different forms, a very powerful role. Bonding capital refers to the ties that are built and maintained within a specific group, an ethnic community, communities, or to want to simplify it too much. As when ethnic media act as a facilitator of community cohesion, bringing together migrants facing cultural, ethnic, religious, or linguistic factors, and strengthening the bonds between them. Unfortunately, this process itself can be pejoratively skewed by some in society, and used to support fears of ethnic isolation or failure to fit in. And here the language of assimilation is often used to encapsulate this position. The expectation here, of course, is that migrants must abandon their own cultures and communities and adopt the practices and values of the host country, however simplified they may be. So under this view, ethnic media is seen simply as part of a transitory stage, a temporary stage, useful only until successful assimilation has been reached. As several empirical and theoretical studies have found, however, the strengthening of particular community bonds does not necessitate isolation from wider society, in fact, quite the opposite. It's been argued and shown through evidence that enclaves, for example, are different from ghettos. The latter are a permanent site of economic social disadvantage. The former, an empowering site of transition and development for communities. So evidence suggests that strong migrant communities able to maintain and negotiate their own cultural, linguistic, religious and political identities are a fundamentally important part of successful multiculturalism. So this is one key role of ethnic media in supporting those communities. Bridging forms of social capital refer to the facilitation of relationships between similar groups. The language of multiculturalism, for example, social capital can be seen in the development of relationships and networks between different groups within society, greater cooperation and dialogue. Ethnic media organisations, of course, such as the NEMBC, they play a key role here, diverse groups in the cooperative space. The day-to-day activities of community broadcasting is also a site for inter-ethnic cooperation. Finally, linking forms of social capital are facilitated when ethnic media engage with wider social organisations and structures. One such example here is the work of African Australian media producers who I've had the privilege to work with over the last few years. In Australia, who engage with the wider audience, question mainstream media practices and challenge mainstream media practices, and create dialogue with political representatives as well as representatives of the police and law enforcement. Despite this long-established role of ethnic media creating dialogue and aiding cross-cultural understanding, political sentiment around ethnic media has often included fears over the fermentation of extreme positions and fears over the establishment of electronic ghettos. So fears of separation. Even within the environment of the 1970s in Australia, in which political recognition of the need for diverse media structures emerged, there was still concern at the highest levels of politics that ethnic broadcasting would lead to some sort of fragmentation of Australian society. What this means is that the potential role of ethnic media in facilitating understanding of dialogue has been largely underappreciated in policy circles. One vital aspect of this is the potential role of ethnic media in affecting mainstream media in order to improve representation of migrants. Just to sum up our last paragraph. Ethnic media often act as a counter to the mainstream, playing an important role monitoring mainstream media for misrepresentation and bias. In the context of shrinking newsrooms, overworked journalists, and the continuing power of ethnic stereotypes, such a process is vital. This process becomes even more important, I think, in the context of, once again, a debate over Section 18C of the Racial Discrimination Act. Often this is framed in terms of free speech and freedom of expression. Compatriot to such concerns, but one that often goes unexamined, is what Charles Huston would call the right to be understood and the obligation to seek understanding of the other. Such a right needs to be taken seriously if mediated images of migrants in Australia are improved. Dialogue between ethnic and mainstream media would be a good step in this direction. Thank you.
Thank you, John. And it's always good to hear the academic context of something like, bridging, linking, and then the ABC gets put in there, bridging. So that's great. And here we have also the ABC with us as well. So we're building those bridges as well, practical bridges. So, but to our next speaker, Dr. Tanja Dreher, who's a future fellow, Faculty of Law, Humanities, and the Arts, University of Wollongong. And I'll hand over.
Okay, thanks very much. I'd like to start by acknowledging the unceded sovereignty of the Gadigal people, the Eora Nation. Thanking, of course, Uncle Alan Madden for the very warm welcome to Gadigal country. I live and work these days on Dharawal country, a little further down the coast, but also spending a lot of time at UTS, very much in Gadigal country. And also, I think a really important time to acknowledge also the work of Gadigal Information Services, for another Gadigal reference, and the home of Koori Radio. It's been a really fantastic example of the vital work and really important and significant achievements of community broadcasting. Thanks very much to Russell and the NEMBC for the opportunity to contribute a little bit to this conversation and to make some connections. I'll try to be pretty quick because I know you've got a lot coming at you and we definitely want time for discussion. So quick points, hopefully some of them are useful. So I want to say a little bit about the idea of my approach to thinking about media representations, media problems even, very much focus on mainstream, is to ask about change. So I'll say a little bit about trends, impacts, and changes. So we've heard quite a bit already. I'll just add a few further points, but I guess worth noting the kind of historical context we are, in the last few weeks, in an intensified and very terrifying kind of moment in terms of thinking about racism and then the role of media. But we also, of course, have a really long historical context here to draw on. So just noting sort of very early 1990s sort of landmark research and interventions in Australia, the Royal Commission into Aboriginal Deaths in Custody and the National Inquiry into Racist Violence. Really important to remember that both of those inquiries, ostensibly about sort of, criminal violence, institutionalised racism and whatnot, had really significant things to say about media and the role of media in contributing to an environment in which racist violence might be tolerated or enabled, where structural racism, institutional racism continue unchecked. So we've got 25 years or more of really consistent research findings in this sort of area. Reminder that Indigenous people and racialised communities are overrepresented when we've got media reporting of problems, whether that's crime, deviance, terrorism, conflict, and then underrepresented or underemployed in media industries themselves, particularly when we look at editorial or leadership positions. And we would all remember, of course, the report just a little earlier this year, I think it was the PricewaterhouseCoopers report, wasn't it, that found that the average mainstream media worker is a Bondi hipster, a sort of 30 or 40 something Anglo-Australian eastern suburbs, middle class, tertiary educated type of person. A few other sort of trends coming up very consistently, as John and Clyde have reminded us, the sort of targets sometimes change over time, but a racialised frame, a way of representing or explaining problems through categories of race, culture, ethnicity or religion, rather than social, political or economical sort of explanations. Whiteness remains the invisible norm or naturalised against which everything else is measured, has to explain itself, never scrutinised. Links, local, national, global events become linked in this way, and we would be very familiar with the sort of double standards in terms of, say, labelling, what counts as terrorism even, also double standards around which sort of lives or deaths are grieved in the media, which are valued, and there's, sorry Karen, I haven't capitalised around to say it surname, but there's a really great piece in your magazine, which is in your bags today, picking out on some of those sorts of arguments, and also the recommendations from the conference we brought there as well. And the idea that we consistently see moral panics, which means a disproportionate concern. It's not the idea that there's nothing to be interested in, but the concern around the issue of crime or the gang or whatever it might be is disproportionate, and that leads to then disproportionate responses. Everything's scaled up and heightened. Impacts, again, we've heard a bit. So a climate in which racist violence, racism, discrimination, racist speech, hate speech is tolerated or enabled. I think that's definitely something we're going to be thinking about right now. The institutional racism is unchecked, unscrutinised, unquestioned, unchallenged. Fear experiences have been targeted, precarious belonging for racialised communities. Again, in here, there's another fantastic piece from Anthony Kelly, did I get the name right? Who was going to be speaking today, wasn't able to make it, but about the connections between media and racial profiling, patterns of over-policing and surveillance. And of course, we've also heard a little bit about the way in which media can impact on community attitudes, which then has terrible implications in terms of employment prospects, but also housing, education, just sort of the ability to access and fully make the most of those very fundamental sorts of rights. I wanted to just say just a little bit about a different kind of idea around change, which is the changing media environment in terms of digital media, and in particular, the sort of massive explosion in very recent years around social media, but also online outlets, which I think in some ways gives us a few other, some new developments or changes to kind of think about. One thing is the way in which some new entrants to the field have actually shaped and slightly challenged some of those kinds of very well-established trends around representation. So I know this particularly in terms of working with Indigenous people and the media, there is some perception that new entrants like The Guardian, Matilda and BuzzFeed are places where we can find a different approach and a better approach in terms of reporting representing at least Indigenous affairs, and we might then think other opportunities there also for change in terms. So, one of the niches that these outlets are carrying out is to do something different in that area. We also find, I think, in a lot of places, a lot of optimism around the ability of social media to provide a voice, a platform, storytelling for communities and voices that we know are historically marginalised or misrepresented. So that's about Twitter, that's about Facebook, everyone can get on there, everyone can post something up on YouTube or whatever these days, just about. a lot of optimism about the capacity of these large commercial operations to possibly deliver on some of the hopes that we've always had around community media and community broadcasting. And I think there's a real challenge there. I think it's a challenge to be able to work in that context. It works even in a way in which it can work to support the general government retreat from resources, from funding for community media and community broadcasting. Already in a 2014 Commission Audit report, we see an argument. The internet is now so ubiquitous, there's now so much media content available, there's now so much scope for diverse voices and marginalised communities to be producing media. Maybe the arguments for government support of public access or community media no longer hold. So there's a real challenge there about thinking, and you know, I hope it goes without saying that I don't think that Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and these sort of multinational media giants of the 21st century can deliver on what we need from community media. But there is a challenge there, particularly in the policy sort of context. There's also the challenge around the way in which we now have much more analytics, metrics, algorithms. These now come to shape, you know, our media diet and our media environment. And they also give media outlets much, much more detailed quantitative measures of what's being clicked, what's being shared, what the audience wants. And again, it often actually seems to reproduce rather than to challenge news outlets, you know, clickbait, those sorts of things. And I guess to sort of bring off John's argument around the importance, you know, the really crucial role of community media as a resource for mainstream media, also as a resource for policymakers. There is an idea that in the digital media environment where we have this proliferation of voices, more and more voices available, the challenge is not simply to have a voice to tell a story, it is to be heard. The key challenge in the digital age is the challenge of listening or being heard. So, a few ideas about sort of strategies, changes, what sort of things happen. We definitely know a lot about the sort of community media interventions that are possible from that sort of side of the equation. And NEMBC broadcasters and others really crucial for this sort of work, and work that really needs much more resourcing and support. Needs to be recognised as really core business for Australian multiculturalism, not a kind of occasional add-on. But media monitoring, so knowing what's going on. Legal proceedings, complaints mechanisms as inadequate as they are. We've heard already about media training, which is really exciting. Media advocacy work is a sort of sustained program that involves also building relationships across community and mainstream media. Self-representation is really crucial. Comedy, community media, I think you know more than I. A few other ideas in terms of thinking of the bigger sort of picture, and particularly in terms of mainstream. What can that change there? Employment or training is crucial, and particularly in these leadership and editorial positions. I'll say a little bit more of that just to sort of wrap up, but the idea about looking for a whole of organisation approach to that strategy, not simply the one sort of token trainee there for a year or two. We need a mainstream media reporting that can move beyond this racialised frame, need to be able to question those double standards. Now more than ever, it's crucial that our media is willing to hold political leaders and institutions to account, to question, to call out. And in that task, the professional values of fairness and social justice, I would argue, are much more important than sticking to a crude sense of objectivity, i.e. he said it, she said it, we report it, that's all we do. We just report what goes on. That idea of objectivity is actually very detrimental to the media, the media reporting that we need. We know that reporting doesn't simply, you know, reflect the facts or whatever, it legitimizes, it amplifies. Similarly, avoiding the sort of balanced bias. This is a term that comes actually from climate change reporting. The idea that, you know, if every time we want to talk about climate change, we need to include the voice of a climate skeptic just to have both sides of the story, we're actually completely skewing the debate. That's actually a really terrible contribution. And a really key question around the preparedness of the mainstream to change. So, to wrap up, in terms of this idea, because I know there are some really exciting initiatives underway at the moment, which is really great around thinking about employment and training within mainstream media organisations, and that is absolutely to be applauded and fantastic. Diversity in employment and training is really important. Just a couple of cautionary notes to finish off with, or maybe even an idea about thinking about the future. So wanting to avoid the trap of traineeships, either that people are stuck in moving from traineeship to traineeship, never really moving past, or so yeah, questions about, you know, what's the whole of career type development opportunities. Being very aware and working against the burden of representation, which is of course what happens to the one person or two or three dozen in a large organisations who are employed to make the changes. It means you can, anyway, it's a very no-win sort of situation, but it's also expected, particularly if we're talking about traineeships and entry-level employment, it is asking the people who are newest to the organisation and who've got these powerful positions to change the organisation. It's you know, a massive, massive responsibility. It's unfair and it's impractical. So that's why the idea about senior and leadership and decision-making roles are really, really crucial. And also questions about the ways in which the organisation is committed to change and what wider changes can be made. In what ways are the colleagues around trainees committed to changing? How will the organisation support trainees, but also then encourage, enable, demand change more widely across? And that is a very actually sort of fundamentally challenging process of thinking through professional practices really broadly understood. So, thanks very much, and I hope there's something useful there for the conversation.
That was, I think, fairly rushing. Thank you so much. There's so much information there that was about community broadcasting, but about mainstream media, and really lots of things to think about there from all the speakers. And I mean, today, I don't know if you realise that today we have 30 presenters today. Yesterday during the youth media conference there was 20. So over these 2 days we've got 50 presenters. That's not talking about tonight for some of the awards. So we've got a lot of rich content, a lot of people speaking, so that's why we go over time. A lot of politicians we thought would be here, so that was great this morning as well. So thank you for bearing with us. And we don't want to put too much pressure on you, Michele, that's the last speaker. You do want to hear what you have to say, very important part of the bridging and the connecting. Michele Fonseca is head strategy and staff development and manages the diversity working group at the Australian Broadcasting Corporation. Michele has worked as a reporter